Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Michael Thompson. I wanted to take a moment and bring you up to date on what's been going on in my life, especially legally. I just received word from one of the attorneys handling my commitment offense case. That was a double homicide of which I was originally convicted and in which I maintained my innocence for the last 50 years. And that's primarily, I think, why I did 45 years in prison. But I received a phone call yesterday, and I have an 1170.95 motion before the Orange County Court. And that has to do with the felony murder rule. And in my case, no one ever said I killed anyone. The issue was aiding and abetting. So a couple of years ago, the state of California did away with well, they didn't do away with it, they modified, is a more appropriate term, the felony murder rule. And so the natural and probable consequences that are typically associated with the felony murder rule no longer hold. So I went into court, Orange County Court, before I was released from prison. I filed a petition, and it was initially um, challenged on the constitutional issues, but the fact of the matter is that the initiatives that they were relying on were um, years away from when I was originally convicted, so they didn't apply. Nonetheless, the Superior Court sent me back to the appellate court, and the appellate court ruled in my favor. So we went back into the Superior Court to have the issue heard on the merits. And the court ruled that as a matter of law, I was guilty. And that was a mistake also. So we went back into the appellate court a few months ago. And again, the appellate court ruled in my favor. So now we're back in court to have it heard on the merits. And like I said, I received a call from the attorney that's handling that particular case, um, public defender. And so it looks really good for having at least one of the murder convictions thrown out. And it looks like the other murder conviction I'll have to pursue habeas corpus on. I'll do that myself. Meanwhile, I'm still in court on these EDD charges. Um, I recently told you that of the 32 counts that I was initially charged with, 17 of those have been thrown out. And I have a motion coming up here in just a couple of days that hopefully will eliminate all but two of the charges. The two remaining charges will be perjury. And those perjury charges stem from having filled out an application, loan application with the Small Business Administration. And in the application itself, there's a box that you check that acknowledges that either you were on parole or you weren't on parole. They alleged that I said that I wasn't on parole. Um, that didn't happen. So the point is that with hopefully just two charges remaining, um, I'll be able to contend with that, and this won't go to trial. You know, I'm mindful of the fact that when those 32 charges first hit me, that there were a lot of people, unfortunately, but it is the human condition, that jumped on the bandwagon that oh, he says he's changed, and now he's been charged and he's taking money from the homeless, and none of those charges were true. That was all press that the prosecutor put out there, attempting to put me back in prison. And let there be no mistake, the intent here is to put me back in prison for the rest of my life. They don't want me out. The California District Attorneys Association took issue with the fact that Governor Newsom released me. And so they've made me their poster boy, essentially saying, look what happens when you release a man like this, a human being or an individual like this. And so that's really what this is about. But as we come to the finish line on these issues, and we're not quite there yet, but as we come to the finish line, um, the vast majority of those charges are going to the wayside. None of them were true, but you know, in the face of those charges, the nonprofit that Ariel and I started while I was still in prison in 2014 has suffered. And that's primarily because of the allegation that we laundered money through the nonprofit. And, all they simply had to do was ask for our bank statements and it would have resolved the issue immediately. But unfortunately, they weren't interested in that. And what this really comes down to in telling you about all this is, the point of adversity and how one masters adversity. And I've been confronted with many issues over the last 50 years. As I just referenced, the commitment offense, maintaining my innocence, going before the Board of Parole hearings 18 times, and maintaining my innocence and being kept in prison because of that. Um, Eventually, I was released. And I said there are many people who took issue with that. But, that is a point of adversity and how one masters that adversity. And so I'm asked many questions in the emails that I get from the listeners about how I master adversity. And I'm a firm believer that it's designer specific, how one musters the courage, the fortitude, the wherewithal, if you will, to contend with and confront someone who is attempting to do you harm or has done you harm, and what you must do. And I was just talking to Ariel about this, and what I do as it relates to that. Now, I've told the story in other settings where, when I went to prison, I couldn't read or write. So the first thing for me was to obviously learn to read and write, to educate myself. And I'm a firm believer in education and how that benefits any individual in their pursuit of mastering not only themselves, but the adversity that they confront on a daily basis, educating yourself. I mean, I think a perfect example of that right now is I'm learning, and it's a huge learning curve. I'm learning social media, how to function on Facebook, Instagram, deal with the website, learning the ins and outs of that website, so that I can post and hopefully Ariel and I can publish a podcast from there. We'll be doing the same thing here, but it's education and how you proceed with that. In addition to not being able to read and write, I'm dyslexic. And so what that's required of me is to develop my own study protocol, no matter what I'm dealing with. I've acquired my education and it was a hard fought endeavor. It didn't come to me easy. I grow a little tired of hearing people say, oh, he's so intelligent. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I have a reasonable intelligence, but I work 3 times as hard as the average person to accomplish what I accomplish. That's because I developed my own study protocol, and the dyslexia requires that of me. Understanding that, educating myself about dyslexia, and what I can do, again, in that designer specific approach toward my own self mastery, has been huge. That understanding, educating myself. Um, so, for each and every one of us, it's different, but it's really kind of like developing your own toolbox and determining what tools you have available to you to utilize in the face of whatever adversity you face. It does take courage. And I think each and every one of us has that innately, inherently within us. It's just tapping into it and how we do that. For myself, I take a fourfold approach to that. But at the root of that, at the base of that, is my spirituality. And there's been a lot of comments about my spirituality, the vast majority of them positive. And I'm deeply appreciative of that. But throughout the years, that has been the foundation of my approach to mastering any adversity, my connection. to my spirituality. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm just simply talking about my connection to the rest of the world, to the rest of the universe, and how I approach that. Now, I grew up Native, and so I use that Native approach um, in everything that I do, toward my understanding of not only myself, but the world in which I live, the ecology that I develop within myself, and the environments in which I am forced sometimes to reside, whether that be with law enforcement, whether that be prison, whatever it may be. Um, but I'm also a firm believer in that there are no answers, only choices. And I think oftentimes that's where we as human beings become conflicted. We're looking for answers. And what it really comes down to for me are choices. So I choose, my approach to any given situation. And I would encourage each and every one of you to do the same thing, to make yourself a checklist, to determine for yourself what tools you have available to you. But more importantly, to educate yourself about what you're doing and how you're doing it. I've been blessed in that many people have contacted me through email and otherwise. And, we've developed a dialogue toward their own understanding of their self. And that to me is really the key, to come to that dialogue, whatever it may be, and with whomever it may be with, is to engage that authentically, as yourself, and to be honest with yourself, insofar as, what you're dealing with. There are many other things that I could address, and I will address as we move through this podcast. But the main thing I wanted to emphasize today is how you approach adversity. And in that, providing an example of myself. There are still many, many things that I face by way of that adversity that, I must contend with on a daily basis. Not the least of which is my physical well-being, my mental well-being, what's going on with me socially and how I contend with that, my relationship with the ecology of myself, as well as the environments in which I enter. That idea of socialization. I've never been big on it. I've pretty much been a loner my whole life. But, I just recently had someone contact me from England, and he suggested that I give up on the idea of helping others. And I understood what he was saying. He wanted me to emphasize just dealing with telling war stories and entertaining people with the idea of what I went through in prison and so on. And I'm not suggesting that that doesn't have value. It does. But to me, what has more value is how I can take those life experiences and use those in discourse, in discussion, to perhaps help others understand what they're dealing with and how they're going to deal with it. And that's really the bottom line for me. I'm going to continue helping others to the best of my ability. Now, Ariel and I are bringing the website back up, Live, Learn, and Prosper. As I said, law enforcement made a number of allegations about Live, Learn, and Prosper, none of which are true, and none of which exist anymore. Those allegations are all gone. Those charges are all gone. Indeed, they actually never charged me with anything associated with Live, Learn, and Prosper. They just simply made the allegation in the press because it made good press. But as we maneuver our way through learning how to deal with the website, I want to encourage each and every one of you to come on the site and, to engage in that process of communicating with us those things that you think are important towards your own self-mastery. And I also encourage you to be willing to share with others. Ariel has a favorite saying that once you hear someone's story, you can't help but love them. And I believe that's true. And I've learned a lot just from that simple concept, to keep an open mind in dealing with people and listening to their stories, and understanding that each and every one of us, regardless of what we're facing, must come to that issue of our own volition. And that's the beginning, that's the start. So I want to encourage you to continue to communicate with me, to send me your emails, and I am responding to them. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time because I'm representing myself in court, and that takes time. I'm handling my own motions, and meanwhile trying to earn a living, and that can be difficult. So these are all points of mastering my own adversity. I've got some surgeries coming up, and so I'll be dealing with those. Those are as a result of injuries that I incurred while I was in prison. Having my feet shot out from underneath me. So now I have ankle injuries that necessitates that I use a cane. You'll see that to my right here. And I'd like to do away with that cane, and I will. So, got some cancer surgery coming up, nothing serious. Anytime we hear cancer, we think the worst, but this is just simply skin cancer. I've had 3 surgeries and I'm scheduled for 1 more. But the point is that pulling it all together and in harmony, in synchrony, so that I'm able to function the way that I want to function. And I assure you that I'm going to. I have no intention of being reincarcerated in any sense of the word. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to live it to the fullest. And I want to encourage you to do the same. So continue to address the issues that you have been. I will be talking more about my spirituality. I will be talking more about our Live, Learn, and Prosper curriculum. And on occasion, it just can't be helped. Those war stories are going to come up because they provide an excellent segue into understanding how one masters adversity, maintains their humanity, and evolves in that humanity. So thank you for um, watching today. And I'll encourage you, as I always do, to subscribe. And it won't be too long, hopefully, that you'll hear from me. In the meantime, I send with these words the smoke of my prayers. And it is my prayer that creation continue to touch you with love, peace, and happiness. Take care.